Hey, it's Kaylee. You know me as the Parts Girl, and I work here at PartsEdge. Thanks for following this awesome journey as we highlight thought leaders and trailblazers, share best practices in fixed ops, and cover success stories of how dealers sell more parts and service. This is the PartsEdge podcast with Kaylee Felio.
Okay. What's the problem with averaging your higher parts and pricing it that way?
Well, remember, the problem is when you have an average, that means half of them are going to be below average and half of them are going to be above average. The reason, when you look at average, it's just that. You've got a middle. Mm-hmm. Half the parts are going to price at or below average and half of them above average. It's the ones above average, that percentage of parts you got to make sure of. They're going to make lower grosses than the one below average. For that reason, and what we see most dealers doing now is it's pretty simple. They look at the most reasonable, higher priced part, come up with, like an air filter. They make it $35.95, and most of them, the retail is at or below that. And, that at least brings consistency. And that's the most important thing. That when you're selling an oil filter, an air filter, a set of brake pads, having that consistent menu price and making sure you have your grosses, that's what sells it more often, because the service advisors don't have to sit and worry about fluctuating prices. And this day and age, making sure that, one of the problems we've seen with a lot of menu priced items, again, just like I said, prices have increased or whatnot, but a lot of times we see they're making 10, 15% gross profit on some of these high volume items. And they should be up around 25%, and sometimes it's the service department trying to keep the cost low to drive the people in. And in reality, you don't have to tweak it a lot to all of a sudden take an oil filter from 10% gross profit to 30. It's like $1.50, $2. So that to me is where you really need to put a focus on to make sure you're maintaining your grosses.
So basically not letting service, discount the parts, really, right?
And where we see low menu items priced and low grosses, typically, if you really get to it, the service manager and or writers get paid off of labor, not off of parts. So They don't care how much parts is making or selling it for. They're concerned with getting the labor.
Do you think that every dealership should have a structure where everyone's paid off of parts and service and hours?
Like
everyone, yeah.
And vice versa. A lot of dealerships have started to implement bonuses for parts counter people based on customer pay labor hours sold. That's an incentive for them. So it would be the reverse, that, you need to look at the overall gross profit. It needs to be fair on both sides. And I know as a fixed ops director, I saw that and tried to maintain that. And I've been in many an argument with service managers who, well, if you raise the price of a set of brake pads $5, I'm not competitive anymore. And, I've been yelled at because, I sit there and say, well, if $5 is the difference between a quality brake job at a dealership, more than likely you got the wrong service advisors that don't know how to sell the quality. It's not the $5 that you raised it.
What I want to try to ask you another question. Hopefully we can get through it. And it's a broken record, but I feel like when we talk about sources, we get a lot of questions and we get a lot of feedback from people, and they like to hear us talk about the sources and structure and all of that. And we get two sides of it. We get parts managers that want to have 5 or less sources, and then we get ones that are trying to achieve more sources. And of course, I know we are big believers in more sources, because of the automation. But I guess my question to you is, what would you say to a parts manager that just wants to have 5 sources? Or why? Okay, no, better question. Why go through all the trouble to break it out? Because you did it as a parts manager, you broke it out. Why go through all the trouble?
Oh, it's simple. Breaking it out a little granularly, and it doesn't have to be our 80 sources, but even 10 sources. Pricing, inventory management, guaranteed, not guaranteed, accessories, again, accessories and tires, different day supply, phase in and phase out criteria. There's so many different commodities that you're working with within a dealership. There's maintenance parts, there's collision parts, there's tires, there's accessories, there's aftermarket. And all of those things sell dynamically different. You want to price some menu items. You want to matrix the captive items. If you're working a lot harder to try and manage your system and your sales, forget inventory control, as much as it's a pricing thing, trying to maintain an effective pricing strategy. There's still dealerships we talk to that, oh yeah, we're selling oil filters at $10, and they do an S equals every time they sell it to override it because the system is set a different way. The counter people have to sit and manage the sale price, and these DMSs are set up very well that they shouldn't manage that sale price at all.
Mm-hmm.
You always bring it up, at a grocery store. When I take that basket of stuff up, they zap it across a barcode scanner. They don't stop and go, oh, I got to change the price on this. It goes across, and whatever management has put that price at, that's what it sells at. Mm-hmm. And that's what car dealerships tend to fail at, especially in the parts operation. And when you only have a handful of sources and you're trying to do multiple things, as we've talked about, it's really hard to manage.
So that's why you go through all the trouble.
Right. Yep.
I had a question I thought of when you were talking, but I lost it. I know what I was going to ask you. Recently, has there been any discoveries or anything that you've seen that you're like, that we've solved or that you've done that you're like, what? Why were they doing it that way? Or
no, not really.
Examples that you could share.
There's a couple of things on the manufacturer level that really kind of thrilled me to death. I mean, I saw General Motors drop their CSO 11 restocking fee from 35% to 25%.
Wow.
That's a big thing for GM parts managers. GM finally gave them something. Usually they're always taking it away. So, but for the most part, no, nothing earth shattering. It's still the same thing. And,
have you fixed anything? Any requests that we've gotten that have been like,
oh my gosh, we get them all the time, updating some pricing, a couple of source accounting issues, and, tax codes, things like that, we had a dealer we just talked to, a great guy who's been on our program quite a while. And it was really interesting how he called up and said, I've been thinking about this forever, and you cattle prodded us. And he goes, my gosh, I've wanted to update my matrix for a while, and I wanted to isolate a group of chemicals, happen to be a GM dealer, that I want to matrix some chemicals and sell the others at list. We were able to accommodate that. We talked with him on the CPV QPO collision program. He didn't realize how easy it would be to isolate those parts in a source and put them on permanent restriction and do his own stock orders. And it was those kind of conversations that he said, I just need to stop and call you guys every once in a while and go over some questions that I have. I keep thinking of them and I don't call you. That's the problem.
So
and
they need like a pad of paper of like, what can I ask PartsEdge for?
oh yeah, 50% of what we do is set up sources to manage pricing, inventory control, and everything. The other half is, and we really learn this dealing with other parts managers. When we get a really good idea from another parts manager, or we hear something, we pass that on. We take that tribal knowledge and pass it on to the other dealers. That's like this CSO 11, now only 25%. Heck, maybe we're going to send parts back a little cheaper, because now instead of only getting 65 cents on the dollar, we're going to get 75 cents on the dollar. So they're a little bit more lenient on what they send back. So those are the types of things that, communicating and working with the dealers to fix their, daily problems that they go through. That's what we love doing, so, and again, sometimes we discover this, and the minute we discover it, all the other parts managers get the benefit.
Mm-hmm. They do. I think one of the parts managers we have, he said it perfectly, that we allow him to be more creative with the way that he manages his inventory. And that example that you gave of the other parts manager is that he was being creative. He thought of things that he wanted to do, and he reached out, and we did it. So
that's right. Having more sources gives you flexibility to be creative. Trying to, well, I just don't want to fool with it and put it out of sight, out of mind. I can tell you, just our experience, if you have a handful of sources and you're only working with 3 or 4, you're going to have obsolescence. You're going to be working a lot harder for the system than letting that system do the work for you.
Yeah.
And for the money you pay on a monthly basis for these DMS systems, it's amazing what they will do if you just know how to break it down and do it.
Yeah. I'm excited for the new year, that's for sure. It's going to be a lot of great conversations already. Is there anything else you wanted to add as we wrap this up? I mean, we talked about pricing and sources. I mean, those are big topics, and we need to talk about them all the time.
Except everybody going to NADA, make sure you find Kaylee on the floor and wrestle her down and say, hey, it should be a good show. It's in Vegas, so anyway.
A great show. Thank you, Chuck.
Okay. Thanks, Kaylee.